Hey Penny, how are you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Adnan. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. Well, thanks for connecting with me today. And I know earlier you mentioned the cicadas are pretty loud outside, but it sounds like your audio is coming through all right, and we should be able to hear you just fine.
That's good. Yeah, yeah, it's very loud in the background. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Well, welcome to the Ozark Mountain Publishing author series. And today
Thank
we're
you.
going to be talking about your book called The Oracle of Ur. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. But as always, I would like to please start out with some background information about you first, and then we'll get into the book.
Yeah, so I'm actually a natural therapist, and while I have been super addicted to reading all my life and have used it as a bit of an escape and a little bit of kind of self medication right from the word go, I got right into natural therapies from a fairly early age and have been working in it. I've been working in it for years and years and years. So that's my bread and butter, and also teaching in the natural therapies field as well. But about how old's my son now? He's 13 and a half. So when I was pregnant with my youngest, I went through this really weird stage of insomnia. And I'd been in a meditation group for around 10 years at the time when this all started happening. So I had some understanding of what was going on, but at the same time, it was a very confusing time for me because during the insomnia, I started getting all these little flashes of visions. And then when I was actually able to sleep, I had all these strange dreams. And they were from a place that I was not familiar with in my life. I'm saying that I'd gone traveling to the Middle East in my 20s because I was obsessed with the Middle East and really interested in it. And these dreams, they were in the middle of the desert, and there were like, um, those weird thorny sort of bushes, and in my dream I was wearing these weird sandals that just did not protect me at all from anything, my feet, and I was running, and there was a full moon and I could kind of see around where I was, and it was full desert, and it kind of reminded me of when I went traveling with my family when I was 13 and we went to Central Australia, but the earth was a different colour. And it totally reminded me of, I've been to Iran and or quite a few areas around there, and it reminded me of that when I woke up out of these dreams. Anyway, they haunted me, they tormented me, and at the time I did kind of know what was going on, but at the same time, it was so traumatic because I was pregnant, I was about to give birth. Uh, they were not very nice images as well, a lot of them, and spiders. I kept seeing spiders. It was very odd. Anyway, not long after that, I went to a retreat. This was when my son had been born for a little while, and he was a little bit older. I'd stopped breastfeeding and all of that, and I started making sense of what I had gone through with the help of a few other people that I'd talked about it with at this spiritual retreat. Anyway, so it turned out, and this one person helped me quite a lot work out the time frame from around that 4000 BC time uh, in Mesopotamia. Well, it's actually ancient Sumerian or even Ubadian. I'd done a lot of research just to try and work out around that time frame what was going on at the time. So um, what also happened at around that same time was this other experience, and it kind of happened after my son was born, but it kind of cemented also what was going on for me because it was this New Year's Eve party. And it was kind of at the height of all of these dreams and everything else going on. I met this guy who I'd never met before, and I knew him, and I hated him on first sight. Hated him, absolutely hated him. And I can't, again, you sit on a cushion and listen to somebody talk about past life memories, but when you actually experience them for yourself, and I kind of, again, sort of knew what was going on, but at the same time, it was really unsettling and upsetting. This guy, I had this weird urge to slap him really hard, But at the same time, I wanted to kind of run my hand down the back of his neck as though I was intimate with him. And his energy felt like an ex, but I'd never met him before. It was so odd. And then because I was so upset with this whole situation, I got very drunk to the point where I couldn't remember what I'd done. And then the next morning, I woke up and had all these flashes of memories of following him around going, "You're a bastard! I hate you! You screwed up my life!" And his eyes were like boring into me, just saying, "You don't know me from a bar of soap, go away!" Anyway, a few weeks later, when I'd gotten over the embarrassment of it, I sat in a meditation and asked what that was all about. And I got this dream where he and I were not he and I, because we were different people, but it was still he and I. And it was the 1920s, and we were, the son and the daughter. We were not related, but we were like the darlings of the oil magnate families, and we were scheduled to marry. And this dream was so vivid. Like, we went through life marrying, and then, the previous version of me got pregnant, and that slowed her down, but it didn't slow him down. And in the end, it was a bit of a sad story because the depression hit and he gambled away all the money that was left. And my last scene of the dream was me sitting at this crappy old kitchen table in this horrible apartment where the kids were in some room or other down the hall. And I had an empty biscuit tin that I was holding, and he'd taken all the money for the rent and gone out partying. So he came in through the door with his pockets out and empty and lipstick and perfume all over him. And the last bit of the dream I remember was throwing that empty biscuit tin at him and kind of saying, "You've ruined my life," all of that kind of thing. So that was a really interesting, I guess, teaching experience for me, learning experience, where it was this kind of closed circuit where I understood that was why meeting that guy had brought up all those emotions and anger and just craziness in me. And it was a very good sort of introduction, I guess, to how to make sense of the bigger memories that I was getting from Mesopotamia or whatever you want to call it back then, Sumer. So that was the background as to the inspiration for the book, and it just kept knocking on the door and harassing me. And at the time, I had a baby and a toddler and a school-aged child, so my life was very much about doing a lot of cleaning and sweeping and washing. And it's kind of boring doing that, especially when you've got a brain that likes to be activated. And for me, I wasn't working as much at the time. So I decided just to start writing. And at first, the story was terrible. A few people read it, and it was, to my mind, it was an interesting premise, but I'd never written a book before. So it was pretty bad, and I had to restart it probably about 10 different times and rewrite it over and over again until I was relatively happy with it. And even then, I had to get it edited, as a structural edit, and a few people did the beta reading, and it kind of just went on from there.
What does the book generally cover? Because it's a very intriguing title. So can you please just cover a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it follows the story of girl. She doesn't have a name at first because she's an orphan, and she goes to stay with her uncle after her parents die. And we find out in the book that her parents went on a fishing trip, and she tried to stop them because girl gets these little sort of visions that she calls the knowing. And the parents went anyway, and they died on this trip. So she goes off to the uncle's, and the uncle can't cope with her outbursts. And the uncle is also financially not so great. So she gets sold into slavery and finds herself at this remote desert household out in the middle of nowhere. And she has to work for a living all of a sudden, sweeping and collecting firewood and everything. And there's a boy there around her age, a little bit older, and he's off limits because she's now a slave, basically. So it follows her journey through a whole lot of hardship until she finally makes her way back to Ur, because she's sold into slavery, sexual slavery, unfortunately, into a brothel. And she has to somehow find her way out of there as well. And there are a whole lot of visions and things that she has along the way that I guess guide her through what she's going through. And you know, that thing about suffering and things can get pretty bad no matter what life you're living. And if you're, I guess, connected to that higher wisdom, it's possible to be able to find your way or navigate your way through it. And that's eventually what she did. She listened, I guess, to the guidance that was allowed for her, and she managed to find her way through and navigate towards becoming the Oracle of Ur through a series of interesting and bizarre coincidences. And one of the kind of log lines for the book is, if only they would listen, because who's going to listen to somebody who was previously a prostitute, and you know, one of the lowest sort of echelons of society. So there's a lot of that kind of thing in there, looking at themes of who, I guess, you know, it's not about your status in society. It's about how close you are to that knowing.
So, Penny, would this book, someone reading it, would that be more like following a journey and being on an adventure, or does it have specific things and lessons that somebody could draw from it? As you were kind of alluded a little bit to it as you were talking about it, about her life, that's something that somebody can read and reflect on their own. You know, not necessarily with the profession, but with the general, you know, lessons that are gotten out of it.
Yeah, well, for the most part, it's a story, and I've labelled it fiction because I have had to fill in some gaps through my imagination because it doesn't all come through. But there are a lot of things that she goes through that, oh well, they're life lessons, I guess you could say. So she goes through a lot of hardship, and she overcomes that hardship in various ways. Not to say that she's perfect, because she's far from perfect, but yeah, I guess there's a lot of, and a few people have said this to me, that that it's quite an inspiring story, and there are quite a lot of life lessons kind of peppered throughout. But ultimately, it's a fiction story.
So, as you were writing about it, were you kind of these ideas? Was it kind of like trying to, from your own life lessons, trying to convey I guess, a way out of something? Were you trying to draw it from your own life lessons, or were you just basically kind of, did it come to you through some, you know, just a different inspiration to be like, oh, let me talk about this virtue point and that point and whatever else you were conveying?
So I took a little bit from my life's lessons, yes, but it was a combination of both. I did want to stay true to her experiences and what she might have learned out of that. But at the same time, of course, I'm writing a book, and I've had my own life experiences. So I did put in there whatever I thought would be useful. And I really did not want it to sound preachy. That was something that I really did not want it to sound. So I wanted, or corny, you know, like I wanted to, my aim, I guess, was to put, I guess, a foot in both worlds. So one in that everyday life experience, and the other kind of spanning something a little bit higher than that. And in the end, trying to, I guess, unite the two a little bit more.
And so the oracle part, can you maybe, if you could share, how does that come about for her? I'm sorry if I missed it. Is this something that she was naturally prone to, or is that something that developed later on and she noticed that she had that ability?
So her parents, when they were alive, always told her to not tell people about it. She calls it the knowing. So she's always had this ability to be able to just know things, but she's got no big control over it at the time when she's little. So when her parents die, she's kind of left with this ability to see into things. And because she's young when it all happens, she's only like 7 when she gets sent off to as a slave to work in this place. She kind of takes them on as her new family. So she's a little bit torn as to whether she talks about the things that come through with the knowing or not, because it's always landed her in a little bit of hot water, because a lot of the time, we've got these social kind of rules, I guess you'd say, in any society. And I guess we learn to tiptoe around those social rules so we don't end up offending people or saying the wrong thing that gets us into hot water. But for her, she's only 7, so she has a lot of trouble navigating through that and gets herself into a little bit of hot water over some of the things that she speaks about to her fellow servants. Yes.
And so, is there kind of, I mean, obviously, I don't want to give away, the ending, but is there then kind of like a all-encompassing tie-in at the very end that then, as people, as you said, have read it, found it inspirational? Is that the part that kind of, I guess, comes back around and I guess vindicates her in some way?
Mm. I mean, the heading's pretty self-evident. So that's the name of the book. It's not like there's any huge spoiler alert if we talk about it, I guess. Yeah, I guess one of the things tying that all together is that thing about her having trust in herself. And even though it's the gods who are speaking to her, and that's how it's broached in the book. Even though what the gods have presented for her as her, what she needs to achieve, her destiny, she sees it as completely impossible. So there's this issue of needing to trust that it's all going to happen, and just to listen to that guidance and to trust herself and to trust that circumstances will somehow lead to that, will all fall into place. And I think that's true with anybody, whether it's, now or 10,000 years ago or wherever you are. It's that thing about understanding what your destiny is and how you go about satisfying that destiny. That's entirely something that kind of happens partly by you wafting it along, but also by circumstances just falling into place and just having to trust that it's all going to happen and unfold as it should.
And so, Penny, in conclusion, what else would you like to, leave us with regarding the book?
Oh, wow, where to start? um, I guess for me, it's not about something that's entirely 100% true to what exactly 100% happened back then, because nobody can really know that unless you were back there. And I have only gone back there in the odd little glimpse, so, it's just impressions. But what I really wanted to do was to make it applicable for modern day. And I know I see a lot on, Facebook groups and other people who really want to have past life memories and really want to experience that and remember what happened to them in past times. And it is kind of fun and a little bit interesting to have all that happen, but at the same time, it was really traumatic. And what I found after a while was that kind of time started taking over now. So I had to actually slow that down a bit and even to some degree switch it off, because I'd come across a person and there'd be this whole wave of impressions from maybe when I knew that person in past times, like what happened at that party. And in the end, what I realised about that whole exercise is that it's the now that's important, and we can learn lessons from the past. So if things happen spontaneously, I don't block it or anything, but I don't do my best to follow it. You know what I mean? I kind of just let it happen and then leave it, because it's the now that's important rather than back then. So I know that sounds like I'm kind of bashing the whole process that I went through. But I would probably have done it differently had I had my time again, and I would have allowed a lot more space for the now rather than just to dive completely into it like I did. So I guess that would be my message to anybody who's interested in going back, would be to first anchor yourself in the now. And, if it happens, it's meant to happen. And if it doesn't, then just celebrate the now. There's a whole lot of lessons that can be learned in the now that you can't learn when you're kind of obsessing about what might have happened in the past.
Well, Penny, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, as always, I'm going to have all the links in the description below the video. And if there's any particular websites or ways where people can contact you, if you could, direct them to that, that'll be a good time to do it.
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple of social media pages, Facebook and Instagram. They're just Penny Barron Author. So, yeah, they're my main kind of pages. I'm a little bit of an oldie, so I don't have all the hashtaggy stuff. Someone's going to need to teach me about all of that.
Right. All right. Well, Penny, thanks again. I appreciate it. I hope you have a good rest of the day. I know you're in Australia now, so you'll enjoy it. Maybe one day I'll get to travel and see that continent. But for now, great talking to you, and I hope we can do this again.
Thank you, Adnan. Take care.
All right. You take care.